stop judging people and categorizing them. That's the last thing what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to understand them. You want more understanding and less judging in your life. And through that power, you will feel the necessity for approaching life in this way.
It's an honor to have everyone here. We were talking in the car right over. This is the first event Robert has done in 7 years. So this is a rare treat for me, and I think for you guys as well. I was thinking as well, it was almost 12 years ago that I started as your research assistant.
I thought it was longer.
I think it's been about 12 years. So
you
it's
were 19 years old.
I was. So it's incredible to be able to interview you.
And you look the same.
Is that a compliment?
Yeah.
Okay. You look the same too, actually. But I was lucky enough to see this book happen. You've been working on it almost every day of those 7 years, which as a writer, I'm just in awe of. I don't think people understand how hard it is to work on a book, and the reward is events like this, and to have it out in the world. And you sort of delayed that gratification for 7 very long years. Why did you choose this topic? Like, why this book and why right now?
Well, it's a bit complicated, so bear with me. Over the course of several years after the publication of the 48 Laws of Power, I received thousands of emails from readers who came to me with their problems. And also I was approached by hundreds of people who wanted one-on-one consulting for their problems as well. And after much thinking, deep thinking about these experiences and my own experiences with people I knew, I came to the following conclusion. Namely, that we humans, and I include all of you in that category.
That's high praise.
Yeah, it is. We have a dirty little secret. This secret is nothing to do with sex lives or fantasies or anything as exciting as that. Rather, the secret is that all of us, to some degree or another, are in pain. And it's a pain that we don't discuss or even understand. And the source of this pain is other people.
Hell is other people, right?
Sartre, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Meaning our kind of disappointing, superficial, unsatisfactory relationships with people. This comes in the form of relationships, connections that aren't very deep between people who we consider our friends, etc., leading to a lot of loneliness. It comes in the form of bad choices for associates and partners, leading to all this struggle and messy breakups. It comes from letting some toxic narcissist into our life, leading to all kinds of emotional trauma that can take years to get over if we even ever do. And it also comes from our inability to persuade, to move people, to influence them, to get them interested in our ideas, leading to all kinds of feelings of frustration and anger. And so we are deeply social animals, which is a major theme in our book. And having dysfunctional social relationships lead to all kinds of problems. It leads to depression. It leads to recurring obsessive thoughts, to the inability to focus on our work, to eating disorders, to even physical diseases such as heart disease, etc. We only see the surface phenomenon, the depression, or the physical ailment. We don't see the underlying source. And sometimes we're not even aware that we suffer from loneliness. And so, about 7 years ago, while I was writing Mastery, I decided what I really wanted to do was to write a book that would help people deal with and overcome this very deep pain that I felt a lot of my readers were expressing to me, that they wanted a book like this. But I just didn't want to write the usual stupid self-help book that kind of throws little formulas at you and little pat phrases about how to get along with people, all that bullshit. I wanted, I wanted to write a book like I always do that gets inside of you, that changes how you think about the world, that gets into your skin and really alters your perspective about people and the world. And so with that modest goal in mind, I asked myself a question like I always do when I write a book. What is the source of this pain, of this problem? The obvious answer is that we are generally very poor observers of people around us. We're poor listeners. We've become so self-absorbed with our smartphones and our technology. We're not paying attention. And when we do pay attention, we project onto people our own emotions, our own desires, or we're very quick to judge and categorize them. That person's good, that person's evil, that person's likable, that person's not likable. And so seeing just a small portion of who people are, we naturally misunderstand and misjudge them, leading to all kinds of problems, to bad decisions, to bad strategies. And so if that is the source of our problem, then the solution is that we all just become better observers and listeners, which is what a lot of self-help books that deal with this subject say. But I found that very unsatisfying for an answer. That's not where I wanted to begin. So I thought very deeply, and I decided I wanted to ask another question, which is, are there moments in our lives in which we actually feel different, in which we are actually paying deep attention to people and actually observing them? And I said, yes, there are these moments. First of all, as children are master observers of people. They are very attuned to the emotions and moods of their parents. Their survival depends on it. Con artists hate children because children can see through their phoniness, their fakeness. So we were all great observers when we were children. When we travel to a foreign country and everything's exotic and weird and the customs are weird, our senses are heightened and we're paying attention to people. They seem so different, we want to understand them. If we start a new job and we're a bit nervous, we're paying attention to all the little power dynamics going around. Obviously, when we fall in love, we're extremely attentive to that person. We're picking out every little sign and detail that they're emitting about whether they like us, who they are, what their character is like. And finally, strangely enough, if we read a really good novel or see a great movie, we're fascinated by the characters that someone has created, and we want to get inside of their world. Excuse me. So, what do all these experiences mean? I know this is a very long-winded answer. I'm going to get to the point in a minute. What do all these things have in common? What they have in common is that in these moments, our desire is engaged. We're excited. We're curious. We feel the need to pay attention to people. Our survival could even depend on that. So when we're excited and curious and we feel the necessity, suddenly our eyes come to life and we're watching and observing and we're getting inside people. And also in these moments, there's less of our ego. We're getting outside of ourselves and into the world of other people. Normally, we don't feel that way. We actually have low interest in the people around us. I hate to say that, but it's true. We're the people that we deal with every day, we kind of take them, they're too familiar to us, but they don't seem exciting. And we feel that our own thoughts and our own world is more interesting than theirs. We have our own needs and our own problems to deal with. So I decided, what if I could write a book that would bring you back to those positions that you had in those moments? If I could make you feel like a child again, if I could make you feel like those moments when you were in love or when you were traveling to a foreign country, where you were excited and curious and really wanted to probe inside the minds of the people around you, that would change everything. You wouldn't have to suddenly imagine you were a better listener or observer. You would become a better listener and observer. So how could I create that kind of magic? by taking you, the reader, and leading you deep inside the inner worlds of the people around you and making you see what their fantasies are, what their lives are like from the inside. So that it's my contention that the people you deal with are a lot more interesting and complicated and weird than you imagine. You think that you have to travel to some foreign country like Bali or see some interesting movie to find people interesting. No, that salesperson at Rite Aid or whomever, they actually have a really deep, rich inner life. They are fascinating. You're just not realizing it. So how am I going to be able to do this? By immersing you in the study of human nature. And making you, thank you, and making you become aware of all the signs, the hidden language that people reveal that show what's really going on in their lives behind all their fake smiles and the masks that they present. And I'll do that by teaching you the language of nonverbal communication, how to differentiate a fake smile from a real smile, how to read the language that eyes are, how to tell a deep narcissist by their facial expressions. And believe me, you can see a deep narcissist by just looking at their face. I'm going to teach you the language of character, how to actually see the signs of what a person is at their core through their patterns of behavior, and how to see the deep childhood wounds that they carry in their present life. I'm going to teach you the language of opposites. When people reveal some overt trait, like, the tough guy, or the saint, or the person who's so charming and meek, I'm going to teach you that actually they are the opposite deep down inside. That tough guy is riddled with weakness and insecurities. I'm going to teach you the language of the dark side, the shadow side of every human being, those repressed desires and fantasies that leak out in people that they don't want to reveal but that come out. I'm going to show you how to detect the toxic people out there, the narcissists, the enviers, the passive aggressors. And finally, I'm going to train you to stop judging people and categorizing them. That's the last thing what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to understand them. You want more understanding and less judging in your life. And through that process that I'm taking you through, I hope you are going to feel the power in this. You're going to be able to develop better relationships with your friends and partners because you're getting outside of your own little circle of thoughts and getting into their world. You're going to make better choices with associates and partners. You're going to avoid the toxic people. You're going to learn how to actually persuade people and confirm their self-opinion, on and on and on. And through that power, you will feel the necessity for approaching life in this way. And as I said, I will alter how you perceive people from the inside out. And once I get you to go that far, you're never going to want to go back to where you were before. So I'm sorry, that's a very long-winded answer.
No, that's great.
But that...
We can call it here if
that
you want.
Huh?
We can call it,
Really.
we're good.
I know it's very ambitious, but I'm not saying I succeeded, but that's where the book came from.
Well, I'm curious, you mentioned this idea of a dark side. And one of the things you've said in some of the conversations we've done about the book is you were saying, and I don't think it's in the book, but it's a great line. You said the first rule of human nature is that we deny there is such a thing as human nature. I'm curious why you think that is, and what is it that we're so afraid of facing about ourselves or about other people?
Well, I tell you, about 7 years ago, I was in Sydney, Australia, excuse me, on a book tour. And I asked the people at the hotel, what should I see? And they said, go to the Sydney Zoo. And I hate zoos because I'm an animal lover, and I think zoos are like prisons. But I thought, okay, I'll go, because I really want to see a kangaroo.
And you have to take a boat there, right?
Take a ferry there.
Yeah.
I want to see a wombat, and I want to see a Tasmanian devil. This is my only chance. So I went there, and I saw the kangaroos, but then I came across this enormous pen of chimpanzees. And it's like 30 chimpanzees, an entire community. That's what they call chimpanzees. And I was like entranced. I stood there for an hour and a half watching them. I was so fascinated. They were so much like human beings. It was uncanny. There was the little child with the mother, and the mother was eating some food, and the look on that child's face was intense envy, it was just like a human child that doesn't like that adults have something that they don't have.
Right.
There was the alpha male suddenly walking around, and all the other chimps were walking behind him. It reminded me of seeing Dove at American Apparel, who was the strutting around, and all of the minions walking behind them. They were so human. But what was so interesting to me was to watch the other people who were watching the chimpanzees as well. They were so uncomfortable with this. They were giggling. It was clear that they were very uncomfortable. So one of the things about human nature is that it tells us that we have a great deal of the primate in us. We have a lot of the qualities of a chimpanzee. And we're terrified of that kind of feeling. We like to think of ourselves as so clean and modern and sophisticated and tech savvy and so civilized that ugly little primate that's so brutal power, it frightens us. But that's who we are. Human nature also tells us that we're a deep social animal, that a lot of our behavior comes from the desire to fit in with the group, right? And that social scientists have said that often when people do a good deed, they want to do a good deed because they want other people to see them doing a good deed.
Sure.
You see that on social media all the time, people posting all the great causes that they support. But we want to see ourselves as people who are autonomous and that we control our own thoughts. The idea that our social nature determines a lot of our behavior, we don't like that feeling. Human nature tells us that we're governed by emotions, not reason, that emotions are the primary thing that determines our behavior. And we like to think of ourselves as so rational
Sure.
above all that. But most important, human nature teaches us that all of us are cut from the same cloth, that we basically share the same brain, the same DNA, the same wiring. So that if some humans are narcissists, are aggressive, have envy, it means that all of us have these problems as well. There's a narcissist in every single one of you. Each one of you has aggressive tendencies.
Especially these people.
Especially these people who read my books. But we want to think, no, I'm not the narcissist. I'm never aggressive. I don't feel envy. It's the other guy. So we are very much primed to denying that we have these aspects of human nature. But that denial is actually a part of human nature.
Right.
Right?
Sure.
And I want to take all of you and say, stop denying and accept us. Accept that primate in you. That primate in you isn't ugly. It's actually a beautiful thing. The animal part of our nature is actually something that's very powerful. There's a force in that. And I explain what that force is in the book.
And you're not necessarily saying to give in to your primal or aggressive nerves, but you have to accept them if you want to channel them or block them or whatever you want to do with them.
Right. Aware that emotions govern you now gives you the opportunity to actually become rational. I say that no human is born rational. We have to train ourselves to become that. Knowing that animal part of our nature gives us the power to move past it. But you first have to accept it. You have to get out of your denial.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you talk about in the book is how one of the things our human nature does is it sabotages us. We say we want to do something, but then our human nature, or we say we want to be a certain way, but then our nature sort of sneaks in. You work on this book for 7 years. You're probing human nature, the human experience. You're working on this sort of big, ambitious goal. What did you learn about your own nature, sort of having to sit alone with yourself for so many long hours?
I learned that I'm insane, basically. It was a revelation because, here I am writing about narcissism, going very deep into it. And trust me, I've known a lot of narcissists in my life. You might even be out there. And I was going, wow, Robert, you actually are a narcissist. You actually have a lot of these traits. And it wasn't a pleasant thought. And it stayed with me ever since. I keep catching myself going, you can be quite a narcissist.
Sure.
Then I wrote the chapter on aggression, the later chapter, and I'm going, damn it, man, you are one aggressive son of a bitch. You know? I'm writing about other people and how to overcome it, but I've got these problems. So it was kind of an eye-opener in that way. But I've noticed that people have, it's only been out 4 months, but people who've written to me, who've read the book, and they've had the same reaction. They go, you know, it's been kind of painful. It's a painful book to read.
No, it is. It's a mirror about the things we don't want to necessarily see about ourselves. So when you have a big goal, like I'm curious too to go into this idea of self-sabotage. You know, Stephen Pressfield has this idea of the resistance, this sort of force that blocks us from doing what we're wanting to do, which is part of our human nature. I'm curious if coming out of the other side of this book, did you learn anything about that you might share with people who are trying to pursue they have some creative work they're doing, it's a movie or a piece of art or trying to start a company. What did you learn about sort of mastering these forces in yourself towards accomplishing something?
Excuse me, my leg tends to do this sometimes. So I have to put my hand down on it. Well, I wrote about it in Mastery pretty much, but there's like 4 or 5 steps that you need for any great project, and if you follow these 4 or 5 steps, you will have tremendous success.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be like Donald Trump and the school or whatever he created. These are real. These are real. So number 1, you have to really love your idea. It has to be something from deep within. It has to be personal. It has to excite you on a deep level. Because you're going to have to persevere for several years. There are going to be a lot of critics, a lot of mean-spirited people who are going to say, you can never do that. Your parents will say, go back and go to law school. All these things. You have to really love it to put up with all that crap that people are going to throw at you, right? And I have this theory in Mastery that when you create anything, the spirit that you create it with, the energy, the excitement, is translated into the product itself. So when somebody writes a book just for money, you can kind of smell it when you read the book. It kind of reeks of someone just trying to get some, you know, we can sense that.
Sure.
But when the writer is excited, it excites the reader. So the love and the desire you put into your project will translate. The second thing you have to do is you have to choose something that's just a little bit of a challenge to you. So if it's too big of a challenge, you will fail and you will blame yourself and you'll never recover. If it's not a challenge enough, you'll get bored and you won't. But if it's just above your level, so whenever I write a book, I choose something that's going to be a challenge. It's a little bit above my level. This one was a little too much above my level. But when something is a little bit more above you, it brings out all of your energy. You have to try harder. You know, you have to reach a little more. And this will create a self-fulfilling prophecy. The other thing is, for readers who know, like my war book, you have to put yourself on death ground. Death ground is extremely important. Death ground means, it's from Sun Tzu. If an army is fighting with its back to the wall, it will fight with 3 times the force, because it's either win or die. Now, I don't mean you have to be that extreme, but you have to feel that you only have 6 months to do it. You can't wait 2 years to start your business. You have to start it tomorrow. You can't take 2 years to fulfill it. You have to give yourself 6 months. You need that kind of energy and that desperation to be able to rise to the occasion. The 4th thing would be, what is the 4th thing? I can't remember. Well, the other thing is, I know there's something I'm leaving out. The other factor, though, is you have to reassess your whole approach to pleasure and pain. Normally, we think of pleasure as something immediate and quick. We want to go to a movie. We want to have a date. We want to play a video game. We want to watch a great movie. To create something big and lasting, it's going to take time. It's going to entail some pain, some sacrifice. And what you need to do is you need to change your whole assessment of what is pleasurable. What is pleasurable is actually accomplishing something that you set out to actually reach your goals, to actually take the time to make something that's meaningful to you. I can tell you personally that fulfillment that I get from writing a book, even though it takes a lot of painstaking and tedious hours of work, is a feeling that is so superior in pleasure to anything else in life. It's like I could die tomorrow and it's okay. I did what I wanted to do. I said what I wanted to do. I felt like I helped people and I worked on it and I gave it everything I had. That is a much deeper form of pleasure. And I want you to reorient your sense of pleasure to these longer-term goals and not to these shorter-term goals. So those are some of the ingredients. I know I left out one. It's going to bother me.
Four very easy steps for everyone to follow.
I know there's something I left out, but anyway.
No, I agree. It's writing books is not fun. Having the books are very getting to the other side of that challenge. That's the rewarding part. So you have to. Your books take 7 times longer than mine, so I can only imagine what that the delaying of the gratification is. It's interesting. What I thought was so remarkable about this book is you would think, we talked about confronting your dark side, but if like the primary lesson in this book to me is empathy, like that you're writing a book on the importance and the power of empathy, which maybe people who either loved the 48 Laws of Power or hated the 48 Laws of Power might not have expected to hear in a Robert Greene book.
Well, the 48 Laws of Power is not as evil, and this book is not as soft and squishy as people might think. But I agree with you. I think that we're having like a kind of a plague now of where people have lost their sense of empathy. They're so quick to judge other people. Everyone, especially in social media, feels so morally superior to other people. So there's so much righteousness in the world, and there's not enough of empathy. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read you a quote from my book, from my brother in spirit, my favorite philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, who had a huge impact on me when I was a boy. And the quote is as follows. I don't have my reading glasses on. Is he who really wants to get to know something new, be it a person, event, a book, does well to entertain it with all possible love, and to avert his eyes quickly from everything in it he finds inimical, repellent, false, indeed to banish it from mind, so that, for example, he allows the author of a book the longest start, and then, like one watching a race, desires with beating heart that he may reach his goal. For with this procedure one penetrates to the heart of the new thing, to the point that actually moves it. And precisely this is what is meant by getting to know it. If one has gone this far, reason can afterwards make its reservation. That overestimation, that temporary suspension of the critical pendulum was only an artifice for luring forth the soul of the thing. I love that idea of the soul of the thing. So empathy is you're trying to get to the soul of other people. You're approaching them with a degree of love, even if there's somebody that seems toxic or repellent in some degree. You're opening yourself up. Whoa, Ryan.
Sorry. Your book is too heavy. This isn't my fault.
Oh, it's the book's fault. I see.
Write a smaller book
Blame
next
other
time.
people.
Yeah. That's one of the laws of human nature, isn't it?
So, where was I? So, empathy is extremely important quality, and I'm trying to say in the book...
You didn't have much empathy for me knocking this glass over.
No, I didn't at all. We're going to talk about that later. And I maintain that one of the things in our nature that's extremely powerful is our ability to get inside the perspective of others and get inside their world. But empathy is a really hard thing to write about because it's not something you can quantify. we're such a culture that loves data and quantifying things. You can't really write a book about empathy in any kind of realistic, practical way because it's a feeling. It's a visceral emotion. It has to be a feeling. And we have this power because as primates for hundreds of thousands of years, we lived without the ability of language in our earliest ancestors. And we had to understand each other without being able to speak words. We're incredibly attuned to the emotions and moods of people around us. And I know in my life, I practice empathy on a very deep level. So when I'm out in the world, and I'm in a store or something, or wherever I'm out on the streets, and I see someone, I go through this process where I go, what is it like to be that person? What is it like to be them, to feel like them? You know? What is it like to grow up in a house? I imagine a background for them. And I use my imagination to get inside their world. And sometimes I get this sort of shudder, this feeling, like I actually can be them, that I actually can feel what it's like to be in their world. Now, obviously, I'm probably inaccurate, but I get closer to it than if I'm sitting there judging and criticizing them. And so I've been doing this for probably my whole life, because it's kind of what a writer does. A writer has to get into other people's skin. So you might say, well, Robert, it's easy for you because, that's who you are. You were born that way. But I wasn't born that way. It's a skill you develop, practicing it endlessly, using your imagination to get inside the worlds of other people. It's obviously a little bit harder to cross gender and ethnic lines and socioeconomic lines, but it's certainly not impossible. And I know I've done it on several occasions. So it's an incredibly valuable tool that each and every one of you is born with, but that you don't use. It's like a tool in your box that just lies there and just gathers rust. And so I know it's hard to talk about and write about in a practical way, but I did my best to sink into it and explain to you how you can develop this extremely critical tool.
And that sort of ties into a political question I wanted to ask you, which is it seems like, and you talk about this in the book, this sort of rise of it seems like one of the big lessons of the book is avoiding the mob mentality.
Yeah.
And so it's like you both have to understand what other people are thinking and acting, but also not necessarily give in to it. So I was wondering, as you see the sort of rise of these populist movements all over the country and the world, and you see this sort of visceral anger that's entering our politics, like what reaction do you have to that? And then how would you suggest that leaders or people should think about these things that are happening?
Well, it's obviously very scary, but I must tell you, if you're depressed about the times that we lived in, these moments occur all the time. History is cyclical. I don't believe in progress. History is cyclical. And this recurs over and over and over again, periods of intense tribalism, and then they pass. These bad days will end someday soon. Could take 10 years or whatever, but humans can't live like this for very long. We will somehow get over it. But it's a very troubling time to live through. And if I were a politician now, let's say I was whispering in the ear of a Democratic politician to sort of get rid of this evil empire that has taken over our country. Excuse me for getting political for a moment. I would say that the greatest danger is to fall for the divide and conquer strategy. One of the oldest military strategies ever is divide and conquer. In military terms, they call it defeat in detail. It means a small army can defeat a large army by putting it into pieces, by breaking it up and defeating each of those pieces in detail. And it's what dictators and tyrants have used for centuries. By polarizing, by dividing the public, by splitting it up, a small coterie, a small group of people can govern a huge country, right? Because the numbers are against them. If people were really being able to act out and join together and oppose this authoritarian leader, they wouldn't last. So they divide and conquer. CEOs do that. Dov Charney was a master of that. That kind of leader, he knows how to divide and conquer with his employees, pitting one person against another, and he's the one who rules it. So Trump is a master polarizer. It's the source of his power. He's able to divide the enemy up and get them to fight amongst themselves, and he can then ride in with his 38% to victory, right? Mm-hmm. That's the source of his ugly, evil power. And it's the source of all authoritarians, divide and conquer. So to counter that, you have to counter his strength, and you have to play the numbers game. And the reality is in America right now that there is a 1% and there is the 99%. And probably most of us here are 99%. I know I am, right? And the vast inequalities in wealth in this country are not healthy. There was an excellent book that I encourage you to read called Why Nations Fail. And one of the main reasons in that is incredible discrepancies in wealth, which means that there's no money left over for education, for infrastructure, for large projects. So somebody who's fighting this force has to realize that we have the power of numbers, right? We have the majority of people on our side. We're not going to fall for the divide and conquer strategy. Okay, that's the number one thing. The second thing is a leader today has to understand the zeitgeist. I have a chapter on that. I recommend reading chapter 17 about generations and zeitgeist. And the zeitgeist that we're going through now is a very radical shift in spirit, I feel, that isn't out there yet, but that is going to be what's happening in the next 10 years. A new generation is taking over, the millennial generation. They've been much criticized by people my age, I think unjustly so. But millennials come from a generation, and it's part of a pattern that is much more community-oriented, that is much more about the collective, about working with the group. They've reacted against the previous generations that were all about the individual and the entrepreneur. So the politician today has to be very, very attuned to the zeitgeist and what's happening, what the future is. And so I think those would be the two elements that I think would be a successful challenger. I could go into greater detail, but I don't want to.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe I'd add to that, and it's a theme in the book, is sort of not reacting emotionally to things that you see. Like one of the things, not only is Trump very polarizing, but he's polarizing because he sort of sped up the news cycle. So everyone's reacting to things all the time instead of doing, Pericles is one of the heroes of your book. He's just sort of like, no, let's step back and look at this thing from a distance,
right,
and become rational, as you're saying.
Yeah.
We have trouble doing that.
Well, he knows how to push people's buttons. He's a master entertainer. Television is his realm. He follows one law of power. People blame me for Donald Trump being president because of the 48 laws of power. And believe me, that's my worst nightmare in life. But there is one law that he's the master of. He's probably the greatest genius that ever lived at this one law. Can you guess what that is? Thank you. He's an absolute master at court attention at all costs. He sucks up the media attention. He's absolutely brilliant at it. Every day there's some new outrage. When somebody in his administration is about, you'll see this every single time, is about to get hauled into the Mueller investigation and indicted, he does some outrageous thing in the Middle East or with NATO or with Merkel to draw attention away. It's unbelievable. But it's because we live in a culture that is so easily manipulated that way through Twitter, that we're so into these, we're so easily manipulated and fall for this kind of thing. So yeah, you need a politician who comes in with a larger vision, with a grand strategy for defeating him, and not get distracted by all of these little...
But also just the world needs to be, like the audience needs to be less prone to outrage, because that's, like I was reading this interesting thing, like Trump loves to watch cable news, but he actually watches with the sound off. He just sees, like you go to your observing...
He's like Chauncey Gardner.
Yeah, he just watches what people are doing, and he can tell from that whether he's provoking the reactions that he wants, which is very primal. And
that's amazing.
Roger Ailes did the same thing.
That's creepy.
It is. It's very creepy.
Wow.
I think we have time for maybe one more question, then we'll get into the Q&A portion.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you've been writing about power and warfare and seduction and now human nature for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
You're already starting your next book. And one of the things I love about mastery, and I recommend it to all these young people that email me, they're like, how to, and I always recommend the book, and then the question they come back to, and I know you wrote about it a little, but I thought it'd be a good place to leave it. How do people find that thing for themselves? How do they find the thing to spend 20 years doing? And I know I came to writing early, I came to what I wanted to do early. You had quite a few jobs before you became a writer. So you found it through the trial and error method. So how do people discover their life's task, whether it's writing or whatever it is?
I'm sorry about my leg.
It's all right.
It's like Dr. Strangelove. I don't know if you see this on. It's got a mind of its own. I can't control it. Well, there's several steps. The first thing is you have to know yourself deeply. You have to go back into your childhood. You have to know. The great psychologist Abraham Maslow called it impulse voices. He noticed that babies at a very early age know what they want. They like this food. They don't like that vegetable. They want to eat this. They want to go there. They want to grab that shiny object. Babies have a series of likes and dislikes from a very early age. This is extremely human and powerful. You had that when you were 3 or 4 years old. You hated this kind of activity and you loved this other one. You don't like math, you're drawn to words. There's a great book I recommend for everyone called The 5 Frames of Intelligence by, I think it's Howard Gardner.
Yeah.
There are basically 5 forms of intelligence. You have one of those forms of intelligence, inevitably. It could be kinetic, which is moving with the body, which is a form of intelligence. It could be verbal. It could be patterns in mathematics. It could be dealing with people. What is the form of intelligence that's natural to you? What were you inclined to when you were a child? What was it that you loved to do? I know when I was young, I was entranced with words. I can remember in the 4th grade, the teacher did this activity where she put up the word carpenter, and she asked us to come up with as many words that we could spell out of the word carpenter, like, ant, different words you could pull out of it.
Car.
Wow. Yeah, thank you.
I got one.
Pen.
Yeah, I should be a writer too.
Yeah, and I thought, wow, I love that. It's insane. You could take letters and combine them into words. What an exciting. I was entranced with words from a very early age. So you've got to know that, and you've got to know what you don't like. I remember when I was 23 or 24, I'm sorry I keep talking about it. I told you I was a narcissist. When I was about 24, I was a journalist living in New York, and I had written this article about traveling through Italy. I thought it was a great article. And the editor wanted to have lunch with me. I thought, oh, great, he's going to praise this article. He brought me in. He started drinking, like, on his 3rd scotch. He started telling me, Robert, you're never going to be a writer. You need to find some other career in your life. You need to, go to law school. Just forget it. You don't have the tools. Your writing is all over the place, etc. And instead of, my reaction, of course, initially I was a little bit upset, but eventually I said, no, that's not true. What is true is that I'm not made for journalism. Journalism is ugly, it's stupid, it's not, I'm sorry, I don't mean to generalize. For me, it's not a good fit, So, I know what I don't like. I don't like journalism. I don't like working in large corporations. I don't like the politics that is involved with 20 or 30 people. I need to work for myself. So that's another step in the process. And you need to go through life when you're younger, having a general frame, a general direction. For me, it was writing, and explore and have some fun and some adventures. Try yourself at this, try yourself at that, all within a general parameter. And then at some point, when you reach 30, which I maintain is our most creative period is in our 30s. I'm in my 50s, so that doesn't say much, but That's when I wrote The 48 Laws of Power, which was a book that just spilled out of me in a way I could never do now. You'll be ready. You'll be ready for something great and something creative because you've accumulated all these skills. So, and that was sort of the path that I took. I had 80 different jobs in my 20s. I worked in construction. I worked in a detective agency. That was one of the most interesting jobs I've ever had. Very depressing.
You probably learned a little bit about human nature there, though.
I learned a lot about human nature. I was a skip tracer, which basically means over the telephone, I'm trying to find people who've disappeared, who've not paid up their bills, etc. And it's all about how you can learn how to lie on the telephone.
For every lover, in the depths of the darkest night, your love shines through, a guiding light. With every heartbeat I feel your grace. In your warm embrace I find my place. Darling, don't cry, don't shed a tear, for I'll be your fortress, I'll always be near. Though storms may rage and oceans may roar, I'll stand by your side forevermore. Through the trials and the tests we face, our love will endure, it cannot be erased. So dry your eyes, my love, and take my hand. Together we'll conquer.
You call up and you say, I'm a great friend of your son, blah, blah, blah. We went to school together, and,
Yeah.
we were interested in, we went to the same church. I need to get in touch with him again. Where is he?
Yeah.
And you have to emote, and you have to act like you're a certain person, all to lie and all to get money. It was the most soul-sucking job I've ever had. But it taught me so much about how to deceive and manipulate people, and about what, a lot of it went into the 48 Laws of Power.
Sure.
I worked in Hollywood, which was also another soul-sucking. I'm sure I love Hollywood, don't get me wrong. I had all these jobs, so I had all of these experiences. I had fun. And then when somebody came to me with an idea for a book, asked me for an idea of a book, and I spilled out my guts about the 48 Laws of Power, he loved it. I was ready to write that book, which I wouldn't have been before. I don't know if this is very practical advice or not.
No, I think so. So it's try lots of things, figure out what you don't like, figure out what you like.
Have a basic frame of reference.
Know thyself, right?
Yeah.
Really, really get in touch with yourself.
I talk a lot about Paul Graham, sort of the icon for that, the man who founded Y Combinator. He was into computers and artificial intelligence and hacking. He got kind of sick of that. Then he decided to go to art school, and he became an artist, living in a Soho loft, the cliche of the artist. And then finally he heard an ad on radio for Netscape, how Netscape was going to be this new frontier. And he thought, here's the chance for me to combine everything I've learned about computers and art and design. And so his wandering around trying different jobs, it all led in this serendipitous fashion. A lot of it is luck in life. I'm an incredibly lucky person. If I hadn't met Joost Elfers, I could have committed suicide, I could be homeless. I agree, luck is an important aspect of life. But when you all will have luck, you will meet somebody, that serendipity will happen to you, but you don't recognize it. You're not prepared. You let it go by you, and you missed your opportunity. I recognized my opportunity, and I seized it.